We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, in a third grade education will tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, I mean, since I haven't spoken on this, got a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single time. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is that not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America. Such systemic racism that has plagued our nation for far, far too long. I said that over the course of the past year that the blinders have been taken off the nation, the American people. But what many Americans didn't see or had simply refused to see couldn't be ignored any longer. Those 8 minutes and 46 seconds that took George Floyd's life opened the eyes of millions of Americans and millions of people around all over the world. It was the knee on the neck of justice, and it wouldn't be forgotten. And it's not white Americans' fault, but just a fact.
The very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farm. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. This is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives. If you believe in this number as I do and would like to join me in the fight for reparations, please email me at friendsofadostv@gmail.com. That's friendsofadostv@gmail.com.
Good afternoon on the West Coast. Good afternoon in the mountain. Good afternoon in the central. Good afternoon on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the reparationist perspective, bringing you those ADOCS, hot topics, and making the case for reparations, making the case for weaponizing our vote, and socializing our suffering. And today, it's your midday wake-up call. Yes, it is, family. So glad to see you. What's up, Brian Johnson? I see you, Jelani Johnson. The Johnsons are in the building. Yes, I see you, ADOS children at 400 years org. And for those of you who have yet to chat who you are and where you are slinging bricks, I want to thank you one and all for joining the live. I want to thank you for being the wind beneath my wings, the wind beneath my voice, and for enabling me the privilege to speak up and out about as the world of ADOCS turns. Yes, indeed. I'm not going to really delay or belabor the subjects. Let's just jump right into these topics because I got to go get my daughter from school. Y'all know ADOCS life is always happening. You want to tune in this evening at 6 o'clock because I'm going to be talking about Dante Wright and how folks are getting fired left, right, and center. The chief got fired. The race soldier, now they got the women. It's not now. These women have been complicit in our execution. This woman gonna sit up here and have 25 years on the force, but don't know when she's drawing a taser versus her gun. She got fired. It's going to be rich as I go over the anti-Black racism show, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That is where I'm going over the updates of the Chauvin trial and the update of the recent execution of our young fallen 20-year-old Dante Wright, y'all. Tune in at 6 o'clock for that. Let me get into this subject here. As always, family, my shows are always designed to continue to make the case for reparations, okay? This is what I do over here. I'm always going to be sharing with you information about how to analyze politics through an ADOCS lens. For those of you who are new, welcome. ADOCS means American Descendant of Chattel Slavery. And so everything I do is to make that case. We are owed in the trillions over multi-generations. I want to thank everyone who is participating right now in the Fix HR40. I did my emails. I made my phone calls this morning, most of which I got voicemail. Some staffers asked that I forward them what I sent to the Congress people because they're going to mark that up tomorrow. Tomorrow, the 14th, our HR40 for our reparations is going to the floor for markups, and we want our edits to be included. And we've been ignored by Sheila Jackson Lee, by and large. And, our efforts are being ignored, just like our COVID relief letter was ignored, just like our emergency economic recovery has been ignored. And we're going to just keep leaning in. Okay, none of this gets done without us leaning in. Our ancestors leaned in to get emancipated. They didn't just sit up here and listen to a bunch of naysayers say it's never going to happen. Had they, we'd still be in that manner of slave. We'd still be chattel slaves, okay, versus slaves now in the private prison industrial complex, turning a profit for business owners and the government alike, which is why they won't decimate it. Which is why many of our men that are in prison are in there for nonviolent offenses, while the state turns a profit on the very weed that got them locked up. While they come up with programs for the opioid addicted for rehab, and now Biden wants to reform, imprisoning people who have addiction. After they locked up all of our addicted, okay? They're turning profits and we're on lockdown still. Anywho, that's a whole nother Oprah. But I want to thank you guys for getting involved with the HR40. I'm going to share the link because, it's nearing like 12, 1, 2, 3. It's around 3 o'clock. It's 3 o'clock in the East and 2 o'clock or so in the Central, 1 o'clock in the Mountain. So you guys still have time to make your calls. I'm going to share that link after the show. This is going to be a little under an hour. You guys get a chance to make your calls and do your emails. You must do it. It's time for us to be invested in our own. We need to be invested in our Americanness, okay? Because clearly the Biden administration is not giving a damn. He's like on day 80 or something, and there's nothing coming. So we've got to lean in and make sure our edits get included in the fix HR40, of which I'll share the link as soon as I take a breath and before I close you guys out. So let's jump into it. I want to share with you guys about, I don't know, some of you may know, a lot of stuff is new to me, so I'm assuming it's new and should matter to you. We're talking about an entire Manhattan village owned by Black people was destroyed to build Central Park. Now, a couple of episodes ago, I went over Bruce's Beach and the city council down here on Manhattan Beach. You know, they co-opted it by eminent domain, ran them up out of there. The KKK is still down here. That's what people fail to understand. As beautiful as California is, it's very racist. Right here in Orange County, they were passing out KKK flyers for different meetings. So folks have this idea because it's so beautiful out here that we're liberal. That is a lie. That is a trope. It's not the truth. The majority of the homeless people down here are ADOCS. They're our people, as in the nation. Over 50% of homeless families throughout the country are ADOCS. I don't have the final numbers since COVID, but it's the truth. Oh, hey, Nina Love. Thank you for joining over on Clubhouse. But yeah, so you need to understand, I already explained in that other show about how the city council has a sister on there, Miss Hahn. She's a white girl. I don't mean a sister like as an ADOCS, but a white woman named Miss Hahn. Her daddy was in with, he was a political officer down here, in political office here in Southern California, and he was friends with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so she impressed upon the city council to give back the land and all kinds of goodies to the family, the Bruce family. Over 100 years, they've been waiting for justice for having their land, their beach property taken from them. It's a rich show. You can go back and watch that. But I didn't get a chance to talk about this entire Manhattan village was once owned by Black people. It was destroyed to build Central Park. 3 churches, a school, and dozens of homes were demolished. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And then I'm going to share the pictures. When Reverend Christopher Rush laid the cornerstone of the first AME Zion Church in 1853, he placed in it a time capsule, a box that contained a Bible, a hymn book, and copies of 2 New York papers, the Tribune and the Sun. These were mementos for future New Yorkers. Rush, who escaped slavery and became the second ordained bishop of the AME Zion Church, also delivered the church's first sermon. He read in part from the first epistle of Peter, an address to the oppressed and persecuted, assuring the congregation that, quote, although now for a little while you may have to suffer through various trials, salvation would reward those who kept the faith. But even as he counseled hope, the church was doomed. What Rush didn't know was that the land where the church would stand, part of a thriving African-American community, had been condemned 2 weeks before as part of the plan to create New York Central Park. The community called Seneca Village began in 1825 and eventually spanned from 82nd Street to 89th Street along what is now the western edge of Central Park. By the time it was finally raised in 1857, it had become a refuge for African Americans. Though most were nominally free, the last slave wasn't emancipated until 1827. Life was far from pleasant. The population of African Americans living in New York City tripled between abolition and complete emancipation, and the migrants were derided in the press. Mordecai Noah, founder of the New York Inquirer, was especially well known for his attacks on African Americans, fuming at one point that the free Negroes of this city are a nuisance incomparably greater than 1 million slaves. Most landowners at the time refused to sell to African Americans. Me speaking, what's new? What's different? A white couple who lived in what was then a distant northern outpost of Manhattan was an exception. subdividing and selling off their land first to Epiphany Davis and Andrew Williams, two prominent members of the New York African Society for Mutual Relief, and then to the AME Zion Church. More members of the African Society, whose purpose was in part to build Black communities, followed suit and purchased land too. Slowly, houses were built. Some of them were rather grand, two-story affairs with barns and stables, and some were modest shacks. The area was eventually anchored by 3 churches and a school. I'll show you those photos in a minute. Owning land in Seneca Village meant more than finding a refuge from the slums and violence of Manhattan proper. Buying property meant voting rights, at least for men, as laws in New York at the time required that all voters own at least $250 worth of real estate. Quote, just me speaking. You see, this is what they do to us now with the vote. They come up with these surreal conditions for us to jump through hoops. You see what's happening down in Georgia, okay, where they're co-opting the vote so that we can't participate. They're messing with our voter rights on all the fronts, right? We're being weaponized. Immigration is being weaponized against us to neutralize our vote. We've already been neutralized economically. And so this is nothing new. And this is why the government owes us in the trillions over multi-generations, because it takes the government on the local, state, and federal levels to make us the anchor of their capitalism. They're all complicit. Once again, buying property meant voting rights, at least for men, as laws in New York at the time required that all voters own at least $250 worth of real estate. Now, you in the midst of slavery. How in the world are you supposed to really own $250 worth of real estate? Moving on. Seneca Village probably had a more radical purpose, too, as a stop on the Underground Railroad. Prominent abolitionists such as Albro Lyons, later recognized as a conductor on the railroad, owned land and lived there. In fact, the African Society, so instrumental in founding the village, was reputed to have a hidden basement for hiding runaway slaves. And the name of the village itself may have come from a philosophy tract called Seneca's Morals, a book that was popular with abolitionist activists. As Seneca Village was building up, however, support for Central Park grew, driven by some of the same pressures that created the African American enclave. The tip of the island of Manhattan was overflowing with people. The slums were spilling over as more and more immigrants arrived, especially after the Irish potato famine started in 1845. None of these conditions appealed to well-off New Yorkers who had already started migrating further uptown or out of town by the 1840s, me speaking. You see, the wealthy were only wealthy. The well-off New Yorkers were only well-off because of our heinous chattel slave labor, which wasn't just in the South. Back to the text, already the Lennox family and other wealthy New York names owned swaths of land in the vicinity of the proposed park. Real estate developers easily foresaw the demand for an exclusive neighborhood bordering parklands. More than 3/4 of the children who lived in Seneca Village attended colored school number 3 in the church basement. Half of the African Americans who lived there owned their own property, a rate 5 times higher than the city average. And while the village remained mostly Black, immigrant whites had started to live in the area as well. They shared resources ranging from a church, All Angels Episcopal, to a midwife, an Irish immigrant who served the entire town. But in 1857, it was all torn down. Even as the church was being built on 86th Street, then painstakingly painted white, the original settlers fought for their lands in court. Andrew Williams was paid nearly what his land was worth after filing an affidavit with the state Supreme Court. Me speaking. In one of my other archives, I shared with you how I think it was yesterday's show. I can't recall. They run into another family. Thank you for your support. I spoke with you about how the government, Abe Lincoln, justified giving reparations. It was $300 per slave that the slave owners got after we fought and won the Civil War. After the Union won over the Confederates, Abe Lincoln gave these Mickey Fickies $300 per slave because they attributed the fact that they took over their chattel in this fight, in this war. When we prevailed, the Union prevailed, as their property. They were paid by the U.S. government $300 per slave. I think the max was 69 slaves, around 18,000, something like that. Instead of paying us, the slave owners were paid. So Andrew Williams was paid nearly what his land was worth after filing an affidavit with the Supreme Court. That's how it works. You know, if you're going to come in here and as the state or the city take property, then you're going to pay for that property. And that's what Abe Lincoln paid the slave owners. They paid for our ancestors as their property since we were now emancipated, allegedly, because we were never emancipated, family. We went from that to a tiny period of Reconstruction where we were making strides for about 3 years, from 1865 to 1868. Then they came through with Jim Crow, the Black Codes, all this, right? Black Codes first. Decimated everything. Even our political people that held political office were decimated. They decimated everything. Then the era of Jim Crow, lynchings and the whole 9 yards. The government pulled the Union troops out. And then the reign of terror came on us. They claim only 4,000 of us was lynched. I don't believe that only 4,000 of us was lynched. We had 4 million at the end of our emancipation. They didn't stop at no 4,000. Okay? So you guys have got to watch them. If you're not scared, okay, because it can be a little creepy. It's like a Jordan Peele kind of thing going on over there. But them is going to tell you all about Compton, where a family from the South moved to Compton because the white inferiors murdered their child while the father and the children were off to the movies in the colored section of the movie house, albeit. And these white inferiors waited for him to leave to catch the wife home, vulnerable, alone with their newborn son. It is chilling. I'm getting the willies right now just talking about it. But it's going to show you the racism up close and personal out here in what? Compton, California. This is based on a true story. Now, I don't know if all the extra in it is true, but this family went through a virtual hell with the race soldiers and the white neighbors trying to integrate their family after the horrors that they experienced in the South. So please know that these horrors did not stop because we migrated elsewhere. All the way here out west, where we were supposed to be free, we were still slaves. And to this day, the new slavery is the not so new slavery is the private prison industrial complex. We went from slavery to sharecropping, and they kept you in debt so that you would have to sharecrop till you dropped dead. And if you refused, you were taken to jail under convict leasing. That means they can lease you out to the very family you refuse to go into debt to. And if you didn't pay your debt through sharecropping, you were thrown in debtor's prison. Oh, you was going to work for free. You were still going to be a slave. And the union left us to deal with this horror, which is why we had the great migration to other parts. Although horror in other parts, it was better than the horrors that they were in suffering to this day in the South. But I digress. Back to the text. Epiphany Davis was not as fortunate, losing hundreds of dollars. By 1871, Seneca Village had largely been forgotten. That year, the New York Herald reported that laborers creating a new entrance to the park at 85th Street and 8th Avenue had discovered a coffin enclosing the body of a Negro, decomposed beyond recognition. The discovery was a mystery, the paper reported, because these lands were dug up 5 years ago when the trees were planted there, and no such coffins were there at the time. That's unlikely, as the site was the graveyard of the AME Zion Church. Researchers from Columbia CUNY and the New York Historical Society have been working on excavating the site of Seneca Village since the early 2000s. The work has been slow, with excavation starting in 2011. The only official artifact that remains intact on the site is a commemorative plaque dedicated in 2001 to the lost village. Okay. It says, at Timeline, we revealed the forces that shaped America's past and present. Our team in the Timeline community are scouring archives for the most visually arresting and socially important stories and using them to explain how we got to now. Okay, so to help them tell more stories, please consider becoming a Timeline member. That's where I'm reading from. I will share it in the chat. And then I'm going to share the screen to show you some photos. Welcome one and all to the live. Thank you for joining. I appreciate your presence and your support. Thank you. All right, so let's share the screen and you guys get to see some of the photos of what took place. Okay, let's go back to the top. So this here is a beautiful photo. These are prominent abolitionists Albro Lyons and Mary Joseph Lyons, who were residents of Seneca Village. Now, as I review this, I'm going to search to see if there's any repair happening for the families who lost their properties in Seneca Village. After I share these photos, I'm going to research that, akin to what's happening for Manhattan Beach, where the city council is giving the land back to the Bruces and all the accoutrements that come with it. I told you guys that the median home price is $2.7 million. Imagine if that was still in the Bruce's family, what it would be worth to them. If that beach was still in the Bruce's family's possession from the past 100 years that they weren't able to profit from it, how far along would they be in terms of the wealth they can leave to their children? You need to understand how we became the anchor of America with 3Ks capitalism. That's what this show is designed to do, and to employ and enlist you as ADOCS and allies in the fight, in the reparationist movement. That's what I'm here for, to always make that case. So there they are. Now this is, these are maps. This enlargement shows the location of Seneca Village, which is now Central Park. It ran along the west side of what would become Central Park between 82nd and 89th Streets. Here is, the only thing that commemorates it, this placard here in Central Park. A sign commemorating the site of Seneca Village, Manhattan's first prominent community of African American property owners, was dedicated in 2001. It's horrific. So let's just do a little research while we're here together. Reparations for Seneca Village. Let's see if they're doing anything. If the city council is doing anything. I see the story. I see sad tales. I don't see anything where they're working to restore that family. Nothing. So the reparationist movement in New York should spearhead that, you know. I know our plate is full, but that's why we need more hands on deck. So there's nothing to show that anything is being done to make those families whole. Sad. Absolutely sad. So let's see here if there's any more photos to show. I think that's it, and that's all of that one. Wow. It's just unbelievable to me that they can create the problems and weaponize ADOCS for the vote to deliver them the White House each and every time, or deliver them any office, whether it's local or state. And a lot of which, you know, we don't know to weaponize our vote because we don't understand how deep this runs. We know inherently that something is wrong, but we can't quite put our finger on it because the history has been whitewashed. And that's what I'm here to do. Make the current events landing you so you will understand that you were owed in the trillions over multi-generations. So let's go back to let's handle this bill that could lead to slavery reparations proposal maybe nearing consideration on the House floor. Okay. So let's just and I'm gonna tell you the way I see it. I'm going to share, first of all, let me share my copyright disclaimer real quick, because they're always bothering me and wanting to cut off my videos and shut them down, which is why you need to really make sure that you subscribe to YouTube and turn on your notifications. They're forever coming for me and most new Black media. Hold on one second. Let's listen to this. And then I'll tell you the way I see it. Uh-oh. I forgot to share it with audio. Hold on, guys. Thank you for your patience and thank you for joining the live. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and patronize the show. It enables me to educate the masses and to advocate for ADOCS, something I'm seeking to do full time. Right now, I have to balance it while I'm in court. Okay, so share the audio. Okay, great.
Each year, Americans waste
I
$21 billion
can't skip that,
by
guys.
overpaying on car insurance. That's why I went to thezebra.com. Because while every company claims to save you money on car insurance, the Zebra shows you who actually can. You can easily compare quotes from top providers all at once. With the Zebra, you can save up to $375 a year. No fees and no spamming phone calls.
After this.
Who needs that?
See what you can save. Compare car insurance for free at thezebra.com.
We're learning more about the Biden administration's plans for reparations. At the White House press briefing Wednesday, Politico reporter Eugene Daniels asked Press Secretary Jen Psaki about how the president would tackle the issue.
Well, he's supported a study of reparations, which I believe is what's being discussed, and studying the continuing impacts of slavery, which is being discussed in this hearing on HR40, I believe it is. And he continues to demonstrate his commitment to take comprehensive action to address the systemic racism that persists today. Obviously, that is having that study is a part of that.
Maya King reports the president supports the idea behind the bill, and Vice President Kamala Harris endorsed it when she was in the Senate. But as Maya reports, that might not be enough to get a proposal to study reparations for slavery to Biden's desk this Congress. And Maya joins me now from Washington. She's a politics reporter for Politico. Hi there, Maya. Thanks very much for being with us. So can you give us some background, first of all, on the bill known as HR40?
The bill was introduced in 1989 originally, so it's been introduced in every Congress now for more than 3 decades. It establishes a commission to actually study the impact of slavery on African American communities and the role that the United States government played in perpetuating these systems that may have impacted Black communities negatively. Now, the challenge with actually passing it, of course, really lies in a disconnect between what representatives would like to ultimately see this commission achieve. Some are nervous or skeptical of using perhaps taxpayer dollars to fund direct payments to African Americans, while others, especially Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas, who has now sponsored the legislation for 3 Congresses, has maintained that this is really just to establish a commission, to begin the process of understanding exactly the harms done as a result of enslavement and several policies, and how Congress can begin to recommend ways to rectify those harms.
And Maya, why has this gained momentum in the past couple of years?
In 2019, actually, was when we really saw the most attention paid to this legislation. As you mentioned, Vice President Kamala Harris actually signed on to the Senate version of this piece of legislation as a co-sponsor. And now it's gained more traction this year, in part because of the role that the Biden administration has played in saying that they support racial equity legislation, and the fact that over the last year, the racial inequities, particularly the impact of the coronavirus, economic downturn, the housing crisis as a result of a lack of funds in communities of color specifically, all of these have really underlined the need for support and the racial inequities that exist that have distinctly and disproportionately impacted Black communities. A number of reparations experts and advocates that I spoke to ahead of yesterday's hearing really emphasized the fact that this hearing is being held for the first time in many years within the first 100 days of a presidential administration. And so they point to that as one positive step, or at least something that they can say represents this issue really being taken seriously, not just by Congress, but by the White House as well.
And you note that it's not clear how committed the White House is to HR40 just yet, but before it can get to Mr. Biden's desk, of course, Congress has to pass it. So what are the specific challenges there?
Well, the biggest challenge to passing this legislation, of course, is making sure that Democrats have the votes. Also, in talking with reparations experts, not just on the advocacy side, but those on the Hill, have pointed out that Democrats' slim majority in Congress is one impediment to passing this legislation, because not only are Republicans vehemently opposed to this bill, moderate Democrats have really been more in favor of more piecemeal approaches to rectifying the issues and racial inequities that we see. Some have supported housing vouchers instead of reparations committee. Some have also proposed universal programs that might not necessarily apply specifically to Black communities, but could disproportionately impact them in a positive way. And I should also note, as my colleague Eugene asked during yesterday's press briefing, President Biden is also in a position to use an executive order actually to establish this commission, which would then give Congress the responsibility of moving or leapfrogging a bit forward to actually begin recommending a reparations program or drafting legislation that would go beyond the scope of a commission to actually starting to understand really what these programs would look like in practice. So there are several steps that have to be taken, obviously, here for this to even make it to the president's desk. But Democrats and advocates, those who are really in favor of passing this bill, say that this year, if not over the next 4 years, is kind of their last shot at really making this a reality.
And Maya, just to be clear, what would actually happen if the legislation was somehow able to sort of garner enough support, if those lawmakers were able to garner enough support for the legislation, and it did pass?
So it's clear that, Democrats are confident that this has a fighting chance in the House. They can get the votes that they need to pass this in the House. And perhaps if they can really be clear about the language here, move it through the Senate. And if it does pass and make it to President Biden's desk, what this would do is establish a commission of around 13 experts in finance, in economics, in sociology, in history, to study the impacts, the lingering impacts of enslavement, Jim Crow laws, and other systemic measures that have really impacted and negatively impacted Black communities. And from there, make recommendations to Congress about what exactly the reparations program could look like.
All right, Maya King of Politico. Maya, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so hold 1 second, family. I can still hear it. You cannot. Oh, God. I got to find out where it is. Just a second, family. It's still talking. So, thank you for your patience. What's problematic about this for me is the fact that I have a few problems with it. I have a few problems. First of all, I've already shared about the edits and what needs to be fixed. Secondly, 87% of our electorate delivered Biden-Harris, the White House, and he's like on day 80 and has done nothing in the form of an executive order concerning the HR40. Yes, I want our edits to get in there, but I'm just telling you that I don't believe he's serious. I believe that this is a way to continue to pander, to keep Black folks hopeful, and continue to re-elect Sheila Jackson Lee and the rest of the CBC. I believe this is nothing but a huge pander. They could drag this thing on into perpetuity if our edits and demands to make this an 18-month commission with experts, not them, with experts. Okay? I believe that it's just something that can drag out to keep Black folks voting blue no matter who, instead of weaponizing the vote the way we need to. Third, I look at all the ways in which he's enriching others. The Senate just gave $31.2 billion to the Indians who have been receiving reparations since 1866, while not including reparations for the descendants of Cherokee and Seminole Indians, instead having sold their repair to white folks for $5. Look it up. I see the way he just gave like $80.5 million to the Asians after they endured a year of verbal assault. 68% of their assaults are verbal. They are just as instrumental in executing us as our white oppressors are, as our white inferiors are. They behave very much like them. A few reminders: the recent George Floyd case had 2 Asian cops. Total was the one who was pushing back the bystanders who were demanding that the race soldier Chauvin get up off his neck. And then there was another Asian race soldier that was holding down his legs. Okay, I remind you of the Asian grocery store owner who executed our 15-year-old little sister, Latasha Harlins, over a box of orange juice. I remind you of the race soldier who executed Philando Castile in front of his girlfriend and her daughter, or their daughter. I remind you of Mr. Gurley, father of 2 children, executed by Peter Liang in the stairwell of a project housing. I remind you of all the videos that you've seen of white beauty supply store. I mean, Asian, white. They identify, they act white, they're white. They make more money than white folks. I've already told you that. How they are choking us out in different beauty supply stores and just mishandling us at large in our communities, where our government gives them set-asides and tax breaks to build business while denying us the same incentives to own businesses in our own communities. I remind you of how the FBI reported in 2016 that the police force has been infiltrated by the KKK, the skinheads, and the neo-Nazis. Biden has yet to do anything about our social and economic justice and inclusion. And so when you deal with an HR40 that's going into markup, and it's this hard for us as the very descendants of the heinous chattel slave labor that our ancestors endured, we don't even get a voice in the matter. And yet Narcan and Cobra, groups that were doing this for 35 years, it took us, whom she did not give credit to. We were formerly the ADOCS movement. Many of us have gone on to form our own grassroots and do our thing. But the ADOCS movement that we founded as individuals on the local level, I co-founded ADOS SoCal. So I know clearly what I'm talking about. Okay? I co-founded that, as did many of my comrades throughout the country co-founded their chapters in their respective city-states. And it was because we were bringing that revolution to the social media. We shamed all of them and then got called Trump supporters and what was they called? Bots and carrying on. Yeah. They tried to COINTELPRO us in the media. And so, you know, that whole thing imploded by the hand of its own people that we were trying to give credit to for the movement. I don't need to mention their names, but the people we were trying to get to lead the movement that we started, from the inspiration of a hashtag and the inspiration of some political history that we were receiving at the time, we tried to put it in their hands and make them the face of it, and they imploded the whole thing. So I'm here to tell you, we get no credit for that. But that all started when Kamala Harris threw her hat in the ring for the president and was 4th in her own state of California because of the atrocious record against American descendants of chattel slavery at the time that she was prosecutor out here, AG out here. Okay? So this is why I have no confidence in these two to get this done. I'll bring you to the political article that she was mentioning. She kept flashing. Reparations bill tests Biden and Harris on racial justice. Then I'll pray us out. I have to go get my daughter. The House proposal has been introduced in every Congress for more than 3 decades and would establish a commission of experts to study direct payments to African Americans, ADOCS specifically. Let me finish that one thought. So Narcan and Cobra claim to have been fighting for our reparations for the past 35 years, but it took the ADOS movement, the former ADOS movement, as we founded it. It took us to put that pressure on all of them in social media before they took this thing out of hiding and Sheila Jackson Lee hold a hearing on it. We were riding their asses in the way that I'm asking you to do right now on this fix HR40. Yeah. I mean, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, phone calls, emails. We were putting that pressure as the movement, as the grassroots. Okay? So they won't tell you that part. But it took us to do that. And then Sheila Jackson Lee turns to Narcan and Cobra for edits while neutralizing the voice of the very people that bought it out of hiding. You know, don't want to sit with us when we're the ones that descend from the chattel slave labor. Narcan and Cobra's on some Pan-Africanist kind of nonsense that makes us responsible for giving our reparations to the Black immigrants, unakin to what's happening in the Caribbean. CARICOM, our names ain't on that. And yet Sheila Jackson Lee, who descends from Jamaica, she's of Jamaican descent, and Narcan and Cobra, she allowed them a seat at the table and tries to silence the voices of the very grassroots who descend from the chattel slavery. We need all hands on deck. Let me finish on because I got to go. President Joe Biden supports the idea behind the bill. Vice President Kamala Harris endorsed it during her time in the Senate, but we already know how much she waffles. You saw her be for Medicare for all during her run and then backpedal. But that might not be enough to get a proposal to study reparations for slavery to Biden's desk this Congress. I don't know why we need Congress when we've got a president that's got the power of the pen. Despite the enormity of the task behind the legislation known as HR40, named for the 40 acres and a mule that has come to symbolize the post-Civil War government's failure to help formerly enslaved people, the bill has new political momentum since its last introduction in 2019, when the GOP controlled the White House and the Senate. Now, why I also have no confidence in this, although we got Congress by a margin in the Senate, we had 8 Democrats vote against the $15 an hour minimum wage, which still ain't enough to purchase a house when the median national home price is $340,000. 8 Democrats voted against that. So it doesn't matter who has control of the House and the Senate necessarily. If they're going to be in there as Democrats voting against our interests as well as the Republicans. That's why I am imploring upon us to weaponize the vote. Give them a red top and a blue Congress to protect the over 53% of ADOCS who rely on government assistance by design of institutional systemic racism until we can replace the lanes with full-chested cash reparationists in Congress. That needs to be trending. Okay? Us delivering trifectas of either party is to our own peril. We are at George Floyd 9 minutes and 29 seconds to the neck. Literally and figuratively. Back to the text. The nationwide protests last summer following George Floyd's killing have raised public awareness of racial injustice and kickstarted a national conversation that advocates for a reparations dialogue, see as valuable. Okay, you can watch my show from last night, my Chauvin update, where I ran down to you a good 30 that we know of that have been executed by the race soldiers throughout the country since George Floyd, all the way through into including Mr. Dante Wright, our 20-year-old baby. So you can fire these race soldiers all you want. It matters not if you're more concerned about their First Amendment to be a part of hate groups that Biden refuses to deem domestic terrorists while labeling me and the folks in the movement Black identity extremists. That's what the FBI has labeled us for speaking up and out about the injustices against our people. So until Black Lives Matter beyond the protection of these race soldiers that you hire who are associated with the KKK, the neo-Nazis and the skinheads, until you're more concerned about Black life than you are the protection of their First Amendment to be associated with such hate and then be hired by the police departments throughout the country and then placed in our communities, none of this changes. I don't care who you fire. What's up, Tommy? Thank you. You can see me live over at YouTube under the Reparationist Perspective if you choose to. Thank you for joining the clubhouse. But I'm here to tell you that this is the problem, that they're hiring these race soldiers and placing them in our communities. What no one knows yet is how committed the White House is to the specific House legislative vehicle, which has been introduced in every Congress for more than 3 decades and would establish a commission of experts to study direct payments to African Americans. Why do we need a study when you just gave $31.2 billion? We've got all the data. If y'all want to study the number, it don't take 18 months. It don't take paying y'all $12 million to study. After 400 years, you can see that dollars bring dignity, and being poor makes us a target. These race soldiers are in our communities executing us with impunity, not where there's money. We're the ones there for their target practice. They're not doing this in other communities. And so you didn't require a study when you just gave the Indians more repair. You gave them $31.2 billion. You didn't need a study when it came to Asian Americans. Asians getting $80.5 million for the AAPI. That didn't require a study. You did require a study to give ADOCS, New York taxpayers, money to illegals to the tune of $15,000 per person. That didn't require a study. I can go on and on and on about all you've given away of our tax dollars while you sit up here and tell us, who are the anchor of your capitalism on the bottom in this country, we are the legs of the table everybody eats from, immigrants and white folks alike. But we need a study that would have still been in hiding had it not been for ADOCS, had it not been for the reparationist movement. Prior to our involvement, they may have had 10 signatures. They're up to maybe 150 signatures now because of the pressure we continue to put on, and you guys can be a part of that. Back to the text. The Senate introduced a companion bill for the first time during the 116th Congress, prompting a number of presidential candidates, including the California Senator Harris, to throw their support behind it. Like I said, she waffles on everything concerning us. She waffles on everything. Nina, I'm losing battery, love. If I lose battery over here, you can jump on the other one. I'm just about done, though. I'm at 5% on my iPad where the clubhouse is watching. Thank you so much. We'll do it till it don't power no more. I'm almost done. I just have no confidence in this. Another thing that comes to mind about why I have no confidence in this. Not only will they not take our edits, but you heard the young lady say that, they're trying to come up with other ways to repair us besides giving us cash. Now we're faced with the over $100 trillion egregious racial wealth gap that they have no other way to close. What they want to do is try to come up with programs that they give with the left and give away with the right, akin to our affirmative action. Right now, corporations are not hiring us because the system has done away with quotas for us as a specific injured group. You can be a white woman and be hired under affirmative action. You can be an immigrant and be hired under our affirmative action. You can be LGBTQIA and be hired under our affirmative action that was intended to make us whole. It's like Reconstruction. We had a small period of Reconstruction, then we had a small period when we benefited from affirmative action. That's the boomer class that's got the unmitigated gall to tell us the same white racist tropes of pull yourself up by your bootless straps and don't be shiftless, no count, and lazy, while doing reverse mortgages on their shit. No wealth for their kids, grandkids. They live off of the reverse mortgage and they want to shame and admonish and chastise you. So it's the same thing that happened in Evanston, Illinois. Evanston, they got $10 million and they want to tell Black folks, put all these conditions in place where you get a housing grant. They want to call that reparations. That's the same thing this commission, this HR40 is looking to do. And this is how you end up with Hispanic $5 ADOCS, white $5 ADOCS, Asian $5 ADOCS. The same thing. Wash, rinse, repeat of the affirmative action. They don't need to give me now one program, run me my check directly into my accounts. That's what you do. Run us the checks. I can buy my own property. I can buy my own business. I can educate my daughter wherever I damn well please. I don't need you, government, who created these problems and made my people the anchor of your capitalism, to tell me or us how to spend our repair. I don't need it. And I'm sure my comrades don't have no problem. My comrades don't have no problem. My comrades have no problems with direct checks and direct payments. We don't need you to treat us like children and tell us how to spend our own reparations. Okay. So, I'm going to finish this article tomorrow. I'm at 1 o'clock. That's my time. I have to go get my precious, amazing blessing from God from school. She's taken the SAT, the love of my life. I thank you guys for being active in the chat. I don't even have time to read all of it, but thank you for joining. I hope to see you back at 6 o'clock for my Ida B. Wells 2.0 series presents Anti-Black Racism, the Chauvin trial updates and updates on Mr. Wright, our 20-year-old baby that was just recently on Sunday executed by the race soldiers in none other than Minneapolis. Love y'all, black and strong. You make it a beautiful, God-inspired next few hours until we meet again. I love you, black and strong. Mwah. Peace, family.